Now, let me start with something on which there should be agreement across all sides of the House. The independent standards process found that a member broke the rules on paid lobbying. Surely the Prime Minister accepts that this is and should be a serious offence. Yet we have seen reports that he will respond by scrapping the independent process and overturning its verdict. In no other profession in our country could someone be found guilty by an independent process and just have their mates vote them back into the job. Surely the Prime Minister and his government are not going to do that today.
No, Mr. Speaker, of course we're not going to do that, because paid lobbying, Mr. Speaker, paid advocacy in this House is wrong. And let me make absolutely no bones about that. And members who are found guilty of that should apologise and pay the necessary penalties, Mr. Speaker. But that is not the issue in this case or this vote that is before us today. It is not. The issue in this case, which involved a serious family tragedy, Mr. Speaker, is whether a member of this House had a fair opportunity to make representations in this case, or whether, as a matter of natural justice, our procedures in this House allow for proper appeal, Mr. Speaker. And that I think is something that should be of interest to members across this House, Mr. Speaker, and should be approached properly in a spirit of moderation and compassion, Mr. Speaker.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, let me put this to him simply. If it was a police officer, a teacher, a doctor, we would expect the independent process to be followed and not changed after the verdict. It's one rule for them and one rule for the rest of us. Mr. Speaker, when a Conservative member was found guilty of sexual harassment but let off on a loophole, they said the rules couldn't be changed after the event. So they can't change the rules to stop sexual harassment, but they can change the rules to allow cash for access. So why is the Prime Minister making it up as he goes along?
Mr. Speaker, all the professions that she mentions have a right of appeal, Mr. Speaker, and that is what the House needs to consider. And may I respectfully say to her that I believe that she needs to focus, instead of playing politics on this issue, which is what they are doing. I think that she needs to consider the procedures of this House in a spirit of fairness, Mr. Speaker. And we on this side of the House, instead of playing politics, we are getting on with delivering on the people's priorities, Mr. Speaker. 40 more hospitals, 20,000 more police officers, wages up, growth up and jobs up across this country. Those are our priorities.
Order. Mr. Perkins, I don't want to say any more of that either. Right. Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, this isn't about playing politics in this place. This is about playing by the rules. And as we can see, it's one rule for everybody else and one rule for the Tory Conservatives. When they break the rules, Mr. Speaker, they just remake the rules. And I know that Donald Trump is the Prime Minister's hero, but I say to the Prime Minister, in all seriousness, he should learn the lessons that if you keep cheating the public, it catches up with you in the end. Because while they're wallowing in sleaze, the rest of the country faces higher bills, rising costs and damaging tax rises. So I ask the Prime Minister, can you tell us what is the projected tax increase per household over the next 5 years?
Mr. Speaker, what I can tell her is that what the recent budget did was take cash from those who can afford to pay the most, and it had huge and had very substantial tax cuts for the hardest working and poorest families in this country. We cut £1,000, Mr. Speaker, with the universal credit taper relief cut for hard-working families in this country. 2 million families had a £1,000 tax cut, and we're lifting the living wage across the whole country, Mr. Speaker. And what we are also doing, Mr. Speaker, is ensuring that this country gets on with a high-wage, high-skill, jobs-led recovery. And never let it be forgotten that if we listened to them, we would have none of those things, Mr. Speaker, because we'd still be in lockdown.
Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, I think he missed out the number, so let me help him out. The Resolution Foundation found that by 2026, taxes will be £3,000 more per household since he took office. My constituents and his constituents are feeling the pinch, and they're worried about Christmas as well, Mr. Speaker. Their bills are going up every week, and the budget did nothing to help them. So can the Prime Minister tell them how much was the tax cut that he gave to the banks instead?
Mr. Speaker, as she knows very well, it is the banks and the bankers who are paying far more proportionally as a result of our tax measures to cover the cost of the NHS. And actually, it's a very moot point, because the £36 billion came from 50% of it comes from the 14% who are the richest in this country, Mr. Speaker, overwhelmingly from the banks and financial services industry who can pay the most. And the astonishing thing, Mr. Speaker, is when it came to voting for that £36 billion increase in 48 new hospitals, in 50,000 more nurses, in looking after our public services, they voted against it, Mr. Speaker.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, according to the Prime Minister's own budget documents, it was £4 billion in tax cuts to the bankers and £3,000 of tax rises per household. Good news for the donors who gave his party £500,000. His bank got a bonus of nearly £8 million, but not so good news for the rest of us, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, this month, as the Prime Minister said, we remember and celebrate all those who serve our great country and all those who have lost their lives, leaving behind loved ones, and those who have sustained life-changing injuries and live every day with the consequences of their sacrifice. Yet hidden in the small print of the budget was a £1 billion cut to day-to-day defence spending.
Shocking.
So, Mr. Speaker, will our servicemen and women face pay cuts, or will there be fewer of them with less support?
Mr. Speaker, I think it's quite incredible that we're now hearing this from the Labour Party when they would have pulled us out of NATO and I think the right honourable lady actually wanted to abolish the army. What you've got, she wanted to abolish the army. The woman sitting next to her, Mr. Speaker. What you've got in this government is a spending on defence, which is the highest since the Cold War, the biggest uplift since the Cold War, and an increase that has restored confidence in this country around the world in our ability to defend not just our own shores, but to defend our friends and partners as well. And that is what this government is doing.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, he knows that I asked him about the annual defence budget, which his own budget documents show will drop by £1.3 billion. And I hear the Prime Minister's fine words. I'm from a military family myself, but I won't take party political lectures from him, because too often the government's actions don't match their words. And Mr. Speaker, I think of my constituent who fought in Afghanistan and yet was threatened with sanctions because he was unable to physically travel miles to the nearest DWP office.
Shameful.
The Prime Minister's tax cut for short-haul flights last week cost £30 million. That is 50% more than the government spends on supporting veterans' mental health each year. The charity Combat Stress has lost £6 million in funding this year, even as their calls to their helpline have doubled. So will the Prime Minister match our proposal to reinvest the £35 million saved from cancelled MOD contracts to support our veterans that surely deserve it?
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, it's because we've been able to run a strong economy and take our economy out of lockdown that we've been able to invest massively in the NHS. We've been able to lift spending on defence to record levels and to keep supporting our fantastic public services. That is what this government is able to do, Mr. Speaker. And I must say I enjoy my conversations with her in spite of the insults that the party political points that she directs it towards us, Mr. Speaker. And I may say, I don't want to cause any further dissension in the benches opposite, but I think you all agree she has about a gigawatt more energy, Mr. Speaker, than the right honourable gentleman, her friend from Holborn and St. Pack. I'm just putting it out there, but it's the same old Labour. No plan, no ideas. We're getting on, Mr. Speaker, with delivering on the people's priorities. We're taking this country forward. Growth up, jobs up, wages up, productivity up. All they do, Mr. Speaker, is play politics while we deliver.